My name is Linda Reed, and the first thing I remember is the sound a crack, like a gunshot right before crystal burst against my face, and Christmas went quiet. For one suspended breath, the room froze. Heat bloomed under my left eye. I tasted metal. A thin shard clung to my cheek as if it belonged there. 12 people stared. The fireplace kept crackling. At the head of the table, my husband Brian held the stem of his own glass, as if the match to mine had leapt from his hand by itself. "Don't you ever embarrass me in front of my family again," he said, low and devotional, a prayer wrapped around a threat. I didn't move. The dining room I had dressed like a magazine cedar runner December china, the crocheted star from our first Christmas tilted toward the absurd. I was bleeding on the heirlooms. A chair scraped. Ava stood. 10 years old. Ponytail askew. Phone to her chest. She wasn't shaking. She was breathing slow, long, and longer out the way I taught her when thunder rattled the windows. Her eyes were on Brian. Not me. "Sit down, kiddo," Brian said without looking. "The adults are talking." Ava lifted her phone. A red light winked. Her voice came out clear and calm. Grandpa saw everything she said. "He's coming right now." Brian turned as though pulled on a wire. The confidence he wears like cologne thinned. "What did you say?" "We're on video," Ava replied, tilting the screen so the table could see 2 tiny squares. My mother Eleanor with lamplight on her shoulder, and my stepfather Judge Harris reading glasses on jaw set. Their presence felt like a hand at my back. "Turn that off," Brian told her. The words were aimed at me. "Linda, look at yourself, you're bleeding on the china. You've made a scene." I touched my cheek. My fingers came away bright. It tasted like pennies. "You threw a glass," I said. "It slipped," he answered, already rehearsed. He turned toward his mother Carol, who nodded hard enough to jingle her earrings. Mara, his sister, folded a napkin. Doug stared at the gravy boat. The tree watched from the corner, glittering like a hostage. The house had that listening feeling a room gets after a shout. Mom, Ava said, eyes still on Brian, "Are you okay?" Yes wanted to come out of my mouth. Instead, I nodded once. Not a lie, not a confession, a stake in the ground. Carol found sugar for her voice. "Ava, darling, we do not share private matters in front of company." "It's not private," Ava said, as if explaining addition to someone who insists 2 + 2 is 5. He did it in front of everyone. Brian took a step toward me, palms open, the posture of a man delivering comfort. I flinched before I could stop myself. The movement was small, but the room swallowed it whole. "We need to clean you up," he said to my face while watching the phone. "Smile. It's Christmas." Ava edged closer. "We're safe, Grandpa," she said quietly. "We're in the dining room." He threw a glass. The word "threw" put a dent in the air. Brian colored. "Enough," he said, the charm burning off. "Turn it off. Sit down. We will not ruin this holiday." "Brian," I said, surprised to hear my voice steady, "please don't come any closer." He stopped. Witnesses have gravity. Even those who would rather not see are still pulled by it when the light is bright enough. Carol dabbed an invisible spot. "Linda, dear, you should apologize so we can move on." For what? Ava asked, polite as a pin. She never looked away from her father. "For provoking him," Carol said softly, which is how some people throw their hardest punches. A click happened in my chest like a lock turning. I could feel my face, my hands, the floor under my shoes. I could feel the difference between surviving and choosing. "We're not provoking," Ava said. "We're recording." The doorbell rang twice. No one moved. Under it came another sound, the crackle of a radio, measured footsteps on the porch. Ava's mouth tilted the smallest bit. "That's them," she whispered. Brian adjusted his tie the way he does before presentations. "I'll handle this," he said, and his smile came back glossy and hollow. He walked for the foyer, shoulders squared, as if he could tape the world together by posture alone. Ava and I stayed under the chandelier I had wrapped in garland. I could smell cinnamon fir and the clean sting of spilled wine. My cheek throbbed. The pain was ordinary, measurable, not the kind that makes you doubt your own bones. A voice drifted from the entryway, even and professional. Evening. Wellness call. Another is, everyone's safe here. Brian answered in the tone he saves for customers and clergy. The officer sounded courteous but unconvinced. Ava slid her free hand into mine. Her palm was warm. It steadied me more than any chair could. "Breathe," she said, almost inaudible. We did. In for 4, out for 6. The room resumed the outline of a room again. I looked down the table. I had set carefully placed cards, evergreen sprigs ribbon. Every piece of it said family. I understood then that family isn't a performance. It's whoever stands when you stand. Bootsteps in the hall. Brian returned with a uniform at his shoulder. "Officer Jennings would like to ask a few questions," he announced, magnanimous. Officer Jennings paused on the threshold and took it in the glittering floor, the bead on my cheek, the little girl holding up her phone. He nodded once to me, then to Ava, an acknowledgement that felt like water after a long walk. "Ma'am," he said gently, "are you hurt?" I touched the sting and felt finally not shame but simple fact. "Yes," I said. "But we're here." Brian inhaled to speak. From the foyer came the sound of a second set of steps, lighter, familiar. My mother's voice, low and fierce, carried down the hall. "Linda." I exhaled. Whatever happened next would not happen in the dark. Ava squared her shoulders. "We're ready," she told the officer and the phone at once, and her voice did not waver at all. The morning had started with polish. Not just silverware, though. I spent an hour rubbing the forks and spoons until I could see my own tired face in their curves, but the kind of polish that comes from pretending everything is fine. The house smelled of cloves and citrus cleaner, the kind of scent Brian liked, because it reminded him of hotel lobbies. He believed a holiday was a stage, and I was the set designer. "Linda." He called down from upstairs, his voice smooth, but edged. "Did you iron the napkins?" "Yes," I said, holding one up. Crisp folds, green ribbon. I'd done them twice. Once because I wanted them neat, once because the first attempt had a crease he would notice. He appeared in the doorway, suit jacket already on, though it was barely 10 in the morning. He scanned the table. "The centerpiece is too tall. Guests should see each other, not branches." I adjusted the evergreen arrangement, pressing down pine needles that pricked my skin. "Better." His mouth twitched. "Passable." That was praise in Brian's language. I carried the roast from oven to counter the scent of rosemary and garlic filling the kitchen. My mother Eleanor stopped by to drop off her famous cranberry relish. She leaned in close, kissed my cheek, and pressed a tiny sachet into my palm. "Lavender and cedar. Smells like Christmas," she said softly. "Don't forget who you are." Her eyes lingered on mine, searching. I smiled too quickly. She didn't push. She never pushed, but she saw more than she said. By noon, Brian's family began to arrive. Carol, his mother, entered first in her fur-lined coat. She scanned the room with the critical gaze of someone appraising real estate. "Oh, Linda dear," she said, her smile polished as the silver. "How lovely you've tried something rustic this year." Tried. Rustic. 2 little blades wrapped in ribbon. I swallowed them whole. Behind her came Mara and Doug. "Smells good," Doug said, hanging his scarf. Then under his breath, "For once." Mara smirked, linking her arm through his. I offered coats, poured cider, smiled until my cheeks ached. My husband's family didn't believe in small talk. They believed in small cuts. Each remark was a reminder that Brian had married down and that I was supposed to be grateful. Brian thrived in their company. He stood taller, his voice pitched lower, laughter booming like a man entirely at ease. He carved turkey, poured wine, quoted sports stats. To them, he was charm embodied. To me, he was a switch waiting to flip. During appetizers, Carol leaned across the table. Such a blessing Brian takes care of you, Linda. Not many men would be so patient. Her pearls clinked against her glass. I glanced at Brian. He didn't contradict her. He never did. I murmured thanks and refilled her drink. Mara slid a look at me. Brian's standards are high. Keeps you on your toes, doesn't he? Yes, I said, my throat tight. He likes things just so. And he deserves it, Mara replied brightly, as if we were discussing a promotion, not a marriage. Brian grinned, clinking his glass against Doug's. Happy wife, happy life, right? They laughed. My laugh came late, tinny, like a spoon dropped on tile. In those moments, I thought of the early years, our first Christmas together in a cramped apartment, stringing popcorn garlands, laughing when the cat tore them down. He had been tender then, or maybe I had been blind. Over time, the tenderness calcified into rules: how laundry should be folded, how meat should be seasoned, how silence should be kept. When the world closed in during the pandemic, the walls of our house became his fortress, and I became the enemy inside. Ava noticed before I admitted it to myself. She would watch him walk through the door and study the set of his shoulders. If they were tight, she slipped upstairs without a word. If he cleared his throat twice, she braced for yelling. If the house went dangerously quiet, she kept close to me. My daughter had learned storm signals better than I had. Now at the table she sat small, but still her plate, untouched, eyes darting between her father and me. She catalogued every micro-expression, every flicker of tone. She was building a map I couldn't see yet. Linda, Brian said, suddenly breaking the hum of conversation. You didn't iron the tablecloth. I did, I said gently. This one just wrinkles easy. He smiled, but it was the kind that tightened skin. Excuses. He lifted his glass. To family. To family, they echoed, all except Ava, who pressed her lips together. The clink of crystal rang sharp in my ears. I reached for my water hand, steadying on the cool stem. I caught Ava's gaze across the table. Her eyes, so dark and serious, told me she was counting again, in for 4, out for 6, the way I taught her. Only now it wasn't thunder she was bracing for. It was her father. I tried to match her breathing. The silver gleamed. The candles flickered. The facade held. For the moment. It didn't happen in storms. Not the kind you could point to afterward and say, there, that's where it broke. With Brian, it came in gusts, sudden shifts that left the air bent sideways. My body braced for impact even when no blow landed. A month of small tornadoes, that's how I think of it now. Nothing stayed still long enough to feel safe. It started with the coffee. A Tuesday morning quiet except for the radio murmuring carols. I poured him his mug, the one with the chipped handle, 2 sugars, splash of cream. He took a sip, set it down harder than needed. This isn't the right brand. They were out, I said. I grabbed the store version. It's the same roast. It's not. His voice went flat. Do you ever listen? A cabinet door slammed. I flinched, nearly dropping the spoon. A moment later, he came back, smile pasted, kissing my cheek so hard it hurt. Don't make such a face. I'm just particular. Later that day, roses appeared on the counter with a note. Sorry. Stress talking. I put them in water, my hands trembling as I arranged them. The petals smelled sweet and cloying, like apology covering rot. The pattern held. A slammed door, a cutting word, a day of silence, followed by sudden gifts. My shoulders ached from tensing, waiting for the next draft. Even Ava moved quieter, soft-footed through hallways, her eyes watchful. At 10 years old, she was already fluent in barometer readings. One night, I stood in front of the mirror, blouse lifted to examine a bruise on my ribs from his lesson the week before. I snapped a photo with shaking hands, then tucked the phone away, ashamed of myself for recording it, ashamed of myself for needing to. My mother's voice whispered in memory, we write things down. Dates matter. She'd been an ER nurse. She knew the weight of a documented injury. I forced myself to open a journal, scribbling the date, the color of the bruise, the words he'd used. It felt like betrayal of him, of us, but something deeper told me it was survival. At school, Ava's teacher noticed her fatigue the way she jumped at loud noises. She sent her to Ms. Lopez, the school counselor. I got a call at work. Nothing alarming, Ms. Lopez said, her voice careful, just some concern about stress at home. Ava's very perceptive. Perceptive. That word sat heavy. I wanted to say she doesn't see everything, but the truth was she saw more than I admitted. That night, while Ava did homework at the kitchen table, she asked Mom, "Why do you wear scarves inside?" "It's cold," I said. A lie too fast. Her pencil stilled. "It's not that cold." I busied myself at the sink, pretending not to hear. My daughter was becoming my mirror, and I couldn't stand the reflection. The tornadoes kept spinning. A wrong towel folded. A plate not warm enough. A glance he misread. Each moment small enough to dismiss if you didn't string them together. But Ava was stringing them. I could see it in the way she studied him, cataloging gestures, learning the pre-storm signs. One Sunday we came home from church, coats still damp from snow. He shut the door, leaned against it, clearing his throat twice. Ava's eyes flicked to me. We both knew the signal. He exploded about the sermon, about the pastor daring to mention humility. He doesn't know what it takes to be a man? Brian raged, pacing. Ava retreated upstairs silently. I stood frozen, nodding at the right beats, praying for it to pass. Later, I found her in her room, knees drawn up, tablet clutched to her chest. She didn't look up when I entered. "I can tell when he's going to get mad," she said softly. "His shoulders go up like a bear." "You shouldn't have to notice that," I whispered, my throat raw. "But I do." I wanted to argue, to tell her children shouldn't bear that weight. But the truth sat between us like a stone. She already bore it, whether I wanted her to or not. By the second week of December, I had filled 10 pages in my journal. Dates, words, bruises hidden beneath sweaters. I told myself it was just for me, just to make sense of the chaos. But sometimes late at night, I imagined handing it to someone, anyone, and saying, "See, it's real." The nights were worst. The silence, the tight smile, the way he'd retreat to his phone for hours, then emerge with complaints sharp as knives. When I finally crawled into bed, I lay stiff, listening to his breathing, waiting for a shift in tone, a cough, a muttered word. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. Through it all, Ava watched. Quiet, deliberate recording in her own way, not with pen or photo, but with memory sharp as glass. One evening, she leaned against me on the couch, eyes on the tree lights. "He's going to be mad on Christmas," she said, as if stating the weather. "Why do you say that?" My voice cracked. "Because he always is when Grandma comes," she replied. "And because it's important to him to look good. That makes him mad inside." I swallowed hard. She was right. And the realization pierced deeper than any bruise. My child had learned to predict her father's rage like a forecast. She wasn't scared of thunder anymore. She was scared of silence. I tucked a blanket around her, kissed her hair, whispered the lie I always did. "It'll be okay." But inside I wasn't sure. A month of small tornadoes had already pulled the house apart. Christmas was shaping up to be the eye of something larger. If December was a month of tornadoes, then Ava was the storm chaser, watchful, calculating, never without her invisible notebook in her head. She didn't announce what she was doing, but I could see it. The way she lingered near outlets with her tablet plugged in. The way she slid her finger across the record button, not pressing, just practicing. The way she started saving scrap screenshots of texts Brian sent me, dripping with venom, voicemail recordings where his voice slurred with rage. She was careful, terrifyingly so. It began with what she called her science project. One evening, I walked into her room and found a wall calendar with red and blue dots. "What's this?" I asked. She shrugged. "Just tracking moods. Red for storms, blue for calm." I stared. The red dots outnumbered the blue. 10 years old, and she was building a weather map of her father. At first, I wanted to rip it down to shield her from the weight. But then I heard my stepfather's words in memory, Judge Harris steady as stone. Patterns matter. Dates matter. It's not gossip if it's evidence. Ava was making evidence whether she knew the word or not. A week later, Ms. Lopez, the school counselor, called me in for a meeting. Her office smelled of peppermint tea, warm and safe. She folded her hands on the desk. Ava is observant. She's been talking about storms at home. Nothing specific, but she's documenting. I nearly broke down right there. She's just a child, I whispered. She's also resilient, Ms. Lopez said gently. I've reminded her if she records anything, it should be public. Not private conversations, not secretly in your home if it's unsafe or illegal. She understands. I exhaled, relief and terror in equal measure. Ava wasn't rogue. She was guided. That night, over hot chocolate, Ava leaned close. Mom, did you know cloud storage can keep things safe even if someone deletes them? My heart stopped. Ava. I only use it for important stuff, she promised, like homework and other things. Don't worry, it's safe. Her small hands cradled the mug, steam fogging her glasses. Her eyes didn't look 10. They looked older, sharper, carrying a weight that belonged on someone twice her age. She began leaving sealed envelopes in strange places, in the hall closet under towels, in the kitchen drawer beneath takeout menus, each labeled open if needed. I didn't dare ask what was inside. I already knew. One evening, the phone rang. It was Judge Harris. His voice was gravel softened by age, but still authoritative. Linda, he said, Ava sent us a message. Just a simple one. Don't be alarmed. She's keeping us looped in. She shouldn't, I began. She should, he cut in gently. It's not her job, but she's doing it anyway. Don't silence her. Just keep breathing. When the time comes, we'll act the right way. When I hung up, I found Ava at the kitchen table, tablet glowing. Did you tell Grandpa? I asked. Yes. She didn't look up. He said we have to be smart. He said justice is patient. Justice. Patient. The words rolled around in my head like marbles. I wanted swift rescue. I wanted the nightmare to end. But patience meant surviving long enough to make it count. One night I overheard Ava whispering to herself, rehearsing 7 words, different variations. You can't hide anymore. Grandpa knows everything. It's all recorded, and it's not just me. She tried them out like spells, shaping her courage into sentences. Finally, she landed on the one that stuck. Grandpa saw everything. He's coming right now. She said it again, firmer. A line in the sand. I didn't stop her. I couldn't. She was preparing for war in the only way a child could, with data, with words, with the weight of witnesses she trusted. Brian never noticed. He was too busy playing his role, doting father in public, tyrant in private. He bragged about his holiday bonus, polished the car, practiced his speech for Christmas dinner. He didn't see Ava sliding her tablet into her backpack. Didn't hear her whispering with my mother on video calls, didn't catch the steel forming in her voice. But I did, and it scared me. One night, after Brian had gone to bed, Ava tiptoed into my room. She sat on the edge of the mattress, tablet hugged to her chest. Mom, she whispered. Yes, baby. If I stand up to him, will you back me up? The question nearly shattered me. She was asking not for permission, but for partnership. I pulled her into my arms, felt the sharp angles of her small shoulders. Always, I said. Always, Ava. She nodded, satisfied, and slipped back to her room. I lay awake the rest of the night, listening to the house breathe, wondering how long it would be before she spoke those 7 words out loud. Christmas was only days away. Christmas morning dawned brittle and bright, the kind of winter day where sunlight cuts like glass through frosted windows. I was up before everyone, basting the turkey in silence. The house smelled of sage and butter, but underneath the warmth was something sour, dread, metallic, and constant. Brian descended the stairs around 9, tie already knotted, suit jacket pressed. He surveyed the living room with a general's eye. Straighten the garland, he ordered. And for God's sake, wipe Ava's fingerprints off the ornaments. Guests notice these things. It's Christmas, I murmured. It doesn't have to be perfect? His eyes flicked sharp as razors. Everything has to be perfect. By noon, the house filled with his family, a tide of perfume, fur coats, and practiced smiles. Carol breezed in first, handing Brian a wrapped box, ignoring me completely. Mara followed Doug, trailing behind with a bottle of wine. Their voices carried that holiday cheer that sounds rehearsed brittle underneath. Dinner began stiffly. The roast glistened on the table, the cranberry relish bright and tart. Candles flickered against crystal glasses. I'd set everything just so, praying maybe it would soften the edges. Carol wasted no time. Linda, dear, you look tired. Brian works so hard, you really must keep yourself up. Her words floated like smoke, sweet and poisonous. Mara added, remember when you tried that nursing program? I told Brian it would be too much for you. She sipped her wine, smiling as if recalling a funny story. Good thing he put his foot down. The laughter that followed scraped like gravel against my ears. My fork clattered softly on the plate. Ava's hand tightened around her napkin, eyes dark. Brian basked in their attention, carving turkey with the flourish of a man admired. To family he toasted again, and glasses clinked. Mine stayed rooted on the table. I excused myself to the kitchen, my chest tight. I pressed my palms against the counter, the granite cool under my skin. For a moment I let the mask slip, breathing raggedly, fighting tears. Through the doorway I heard them continue. She's gotten sensitive. Always so dramatic. You're a saint for putting up with her, Brian. My vision blurred. Then Ava's voice, sharp and clear, cut through. Why do you all hate my mom? Silence. My heart lurched. I rushed back to the doorway, unseen, listening. Ava, honey. Brian's voice softened dangerously. We don't hate. Yes, you do, she interrupted. You make her sad. You make her cry when you think I'm not looking. I bit my lip, trembling. Carol's syrupy tone followed. Sweetheart, adults just have complicated. My mom is the smartest person I know, Ava said louder now. She helps me with homework, she fixes things, she's kind even when you're mean. And none of you even see her. Her small fists clenched on the tablecloth. You just see someone to be cruel to. Ava. Brian snapped, the mask slipping. Enough, go to your room. No, Daddy, she said, steady and unblinking. It's not enough. The air grew taut, the table straining under silence. Doug coughed. Mara shifted. Carol looked away. Brian's face reddened, veins standing at his temple. He slammed his palm against the table. Glasses rattled, a candle toppled wax onto linen. Go. Now. His voice was deadly quiet. I rushed in then, unable to let her stand alone. Brian, please. She's just a child. Doesn't understand what he snarled. His hands curled into fists. That her mother is weak? That she's pathetic. Don't call her that. Ava's voice rose fierce and shaking. Don't you dare. The room stilled. Carol's fork hovered midair. Mara's lips parted. Doug froze. Even the fire in the hearth crackled softer, as though waiting. Brian roared, surging up from his chair. I'll call her whatever I want. This is my house, my family, and I. You'll what? I snapped, voice trembling but loud enough to slice the air. Hit your daughter in front of everyone. Show them what you really are. The words echoed sharp and dangerous. Brian stopped short, chest heaving. His face contorted with rage, but hesitation flickered. His family's eyes were on him, and in that second, the cracks showed. Then it came. The sound that split the room, crystal shattering against my cheek. My vision blurred with pain, heat flooding my face. I stumbled backward. My hand pressed to the red blooming there. The room gasped, some shocked, others silent, some smirking. The line had been crossed. Brian towered over me, chest heaving. Don't you ever embarrass me in front of my family again, he growled, voice dripping venom. And then, before he could spit another word, a chair scraped. Ava stood. Small, steady phone clutched in her hand, red light glowing, her voice calm and cutting. Grandpa saw everything. He's coming right now. The words landed like a stone in a still pond. Ripples of shock spread across the table. Brian's sneer faltered. Carol's pearls stilled. Mara's smirk died. Doug shifted uncomfortably. The silence was complete terrifying. For the first time that day, I saw something new in their faces, not scorn, not superiority, but fear. The silence after Ava spoke felt alive, thick enough to choke on. My husband's family froze mid-motion, forks, suspended glasses, hovering napkins clenched in fists. The fire hissed in the hearth, a log collapsing inward, as if even the flames bent toward the center of the storm. Brian blinked first. He laughed sharp and brittle. "Don't be ridiculous," he sneered. "She's a child. She doesn't know what she's saying." But Ava didn't sit down. Her small fingers tightened around the phone, the red light still glowing. He saw everything. She repeated, her voice louder this time, more deliberate. "And he's coming right now." Carol gasped softly, clutching her pearls. Mara frowned, eyes darting between Brian and Ava. Doug shifted in his chair, his fork clattering onto the plate. They weren't sure who to believe. But I knew. I knew Ava wasn't bluffing. Because 2 weeks earlier, I'd overheard her whisper into her tablet, "Don't worry, Grandpa, I'll keep recording." Brian's face darkened. "Turn it off." He ordered, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Now." "No," Ava said simply. She tilted the screen toward the table, and in that instant all of them saw it, my stepfather, Judge Harris, sitting in his leather chair watching with hawk's eyes. My mother, Eleanor, at his side. Their presence was undeniable. Brian stumbled back a step, his bravado leaking away like air from a balloon. You don't understand?" he stammered. "This is private. Family matters." "Not anymore," I whispered, my hand still pressed to my cheek, blood seeping between my fingers. "Not when you make violence public." The doorbell rang. Once. Twice. A steady knock followed, firm and unhurried. The sound cracked through the dining room like judgment itself. Brian's jaw clenched. "Stay here," he barked, striding toward the foyer. He straightened his tie, rolled his shoulders, pasted on that practiced smile. The mask he wore for the world. But his hands trembled. We all heard the door creak open. A voice drifted back, deep, resonant, commanding. "Evening. We're responding to a welfare call. Is Linda Reed present?" My name in a stranger's voice, relief and terror in the same breath. Brian's reply was smooth, almost convincing. "Officer, everything's fine. Bit of a family misunderstanding, that's all." But then another voice, colder, steadier, broke in. "Where's my daughter?" My chest clenched. "Dad." Judge Harris had arrived. "Sir, this is official business," Brian stuttered. "You can't." "I'm not here as a judge," my stepfather interrupted. "I'm here as her father, and I have a right to see her." A shuffle of boots echoed through the hallway. Then they appeared, 2 officers tall in their uniforms, and behind them my stepfather, coat unbuttoned, face carved from stone. My mother trailed, close, eyes wet but burning. The room shifted, gravity bending toward the doorway. Brian froze, mouth working soundlessly. His family shrank in their chairs, their certainty unraveling thread by thread. "Linda," Dad said, eyes locking on me. He saw the cut, the swelling. His jaw clenched so hard I could hear his teeth grind. "How long?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. I couldn't lie anymore. Not with Ava standing tall, not with witnesses filling the room. 3 years, I whispered. 3 years of this. A muscle jumped in Dad's cheek. He turned slowly toward Brian. The air crackled with the kind of silence that comes before lightning. 3 years you've been putting your hands on my daughter." Brian's hands flew up, palms open. "It's not what you think," she exaggerates. She bruises easy. Ask anyone." "No," Ava said, her voice slicing through his excuses like a blade. She lifted her phone higher. I have recordings. 43 days, 17 hours, 28 incidents. Grandpa already has them all. Gasps spread like wildfire. Mara's lips parted. Doug cursed under his breath. Carol went pale. Brian's face drained of color. Jesus, Brian, Doug muttered. What have you done? Brian's mask shattered. He lunged toward Ava, hand outstretched. Give me that phone. I moved before I knew I could, stepping in front of her. My arms spread wide. Don't you dare touch her. My voice was louder than fear, louder than pain, louder than him. The officers were faster. One caught Brian's wrist midair, twisting it behind his back. The other pulled his free arm, pinning him. The sound of metal cuffs snapping shut filled the room. You can't do this, Brian shouted, thrashing. This is my house, my family. The officer's voice was calm. Sir, you're under arrest for domestic violence. You have the right to remain silent. Carol rose, trembling. This is a mistake. Brian would never. Sit down, ma'am, Dad said coldly. I've seen the videos. You all saw. You enabled it. His gaze swept over each of them, and they wilted under its weight. Brian's protests dwindled into gasps, his face twisted with rage and fear. His family shrank back, horrified, now distancing themselves as though his violence might stain them. Through it all, Ava stood steady, the glow of her phone painting her face. Her chin lifted, her shoulders squared. 10 years old, but unshakable. When the officers dragged Brian toward the door, he twisted his neck to glare at me. Linda, you'll regret this. You'll... No, I said firmly, my voice ringing clear. I'll finally be free. The door slammed behind them, and with it, the weight of years lifted, heavy but gone. The room was silent except for the crackle of the fire and Ava's steady breathing beside me. My mother came forward, wrapping us both in her arms. Dad stood sentinel, unmovable, a wall between us and the ruin that had once called itself a husband. Christmas lights glowed against the window pane. For the first time in years, they looked like hope. The house was still humming with echoes, hours after the officers hauled Brian away. His family had scattered like frightened birds, murmuring excuses as they clutched coats and gifts they'd barely unwrapped. By midnight, the dining table sat abandoned, turkey carcass, cooling candles melted into crooked stubs. But the silence felt different now. Not suffocating, cleansed, almost holy. I sat on the couch with Ava curled against me, her head heavy on my shoulder. My cheek throbbed beneath the makeshift bandage Eleanor had pressed against it, but the sting barely registered. Pain was familiar. What wasn't familiar was this lightness in my chest. Relief. Air moving freely for the first time in years. Judge Harris paced the room like a man guarding a perimeter. Every so often he paused to glance at us, his gaze softening before sharpening again. You'll come with us tonight, he said finally, his voice leaving no room for debate. No arguments. You and Ava. My house is yours until this is settled. I nodded, exhaustion loosening the last threads of resistance. What about the house? The bills. Forget the house, he said firmly. Forget everything except safety. The rest we'll handle in court. The word court made Brian's absence feel permanent. His world, his fortress, would now be measured in charges and hearings, not walls and rules. And for once, I didn't feel small when I thought about it. I felt steady. Ava stirred. Mom. Her voice was soft, raspy with sleep. Yes, sweetheart. Are we safe now? I kissed the top of her head, inhaling the faint scent of cinnamon shampoo. Yes, I whispered. We're safe. Her small fingers squeezed mine. I'm glad I said it. The 7 words. My throat tightened. I thought of her standing tall at the table, voice steady. Grandpa saw everything. He's coming right now. She had spoken them like a spell, breaking years of silence. You saved us? I said, tears blurring my vision. You were braver than I ever was. She lifted her head, her eyes glinting in the glow of the Christmas tree. No, Mom. You're brave too. You protected me even when it hurt you." I couldn't speak. I just held her tighter, rocking gently like I used to when she was a baby, afraid of storms. Only this time, it was me who needed the comfort. In the days that followed, the story unfolded like a long exhale. The restraining order filed. The recordings catalogued. My journal, once a private shame, handed over as evidence. Piece by piece, the fortress Brian had built out of fear collapsed under the weight of truth. The whispers from neighbors, the sideways glances, the sympathetic nods, they didn't matter. What mattered was that Ava laughed again, a real laugh that filled the kitchen when she spilled hot cocoa when the cat batted at her shoelace. What mattered was that I could stand at the mirror, look at the fading bruise, and see not weakness but survival. Christmas decorations came down late that year. On New Year's Day, Ava and I packed what we could into boxes and left the house behind. Dad loaded the car with military precision, Eleanor tucking snacks and blankets into every spare corner. When we pulled away, I didn't look back. 6 months later, I stood in a classroom, sunlight pouring through wide windows. Ava's teacher, now Principal Andre, had asked me to speak to her students about resilience. My palms sweated. My heart raced. But when I looked at Ava in the front row, her chin lifted proudly, courage rushed in like air. I told them the truth, not every detail, but enough. About storms you can't predict, about silence heavier than thunder, about how sometimes the bravest voice in the room belongs to the smallest person, and how protection can mean speaking, recording, refusing to stay quiet. When I finished, Ava clapped, first her hands small but loud, echoing through the room. Others joined, and I smiled through tears. For the first time in years, my voice had been my own. 3 years later, Ava turned 13. She was taller, sharper, carrying herself with a poise that startled me. Brian's name never passed her lips. When he wrote letters from prison asking for forgiveness, she set them aside unopened. "Real fathers protect," she told me. "He was just the man who lived with us." And me, I finally finished nursing school. The bruises on my arms were replaced with ink stains from note-taking, exhaustion from overnight shifts at the hospital. I treated patients with a compassion sharpened by experience. I saw the signs others missed, the flinches, the quiet explanations. I knew how to ask the right questions, because I had lived them. At night, Ava and I would sit on our small balcony watching sunsets bleed into stars. We'd sip cocoa, share stories, laugh at silly things. Each laugh was proof that life could bloom after storms, that broken glass could become mosaic. Now as I sit with this memory, I think back to that Christmas table, the firelight, the turkey, the sharp crack of crystal against my cheek. And I think of Ava's voice, clear as a bell. "Grandpa saw everything. He's coming right now." Those 7 words didn't just silence a room. They opened a door. They reminded me that silence protects no one but truth. Truth can save lives. So if you're listening, wherever you are, maybe you've seen storms like mine. Maybe you've stood in rooms too quiet after a shout. Remember this: you're not alone. Speaking takes courage, but silence costs more. If this story touched you, share it. Leave a comment. Let someone else know they're not the only one holding their breath in the dark. And if you haven't yet, subscribe, because here we tell stories that remind us all storms pass, but voices last. Together we make sure no one stands alone.